Hi, Ian Troup. I'm a fly fishing guide, instructor, and competitive angler. I'm going to tie a very popular Perdigon called the Gasolina. I'm going to show you the original version and a much faster twist to tie it in. Okay, so I'm going to tie a Perdigon fly. So this is a fly, Perdigon is a Spanish name, and the Spanish name is pellet. So much like a pellet, it's like its namesake, it sinks through the water really, really quickly. So the Perdigon flies, if you haven't seen them, they have no hackle, no dubbing, very hydrodynamic. So because of that, they sink really quickly, but you have to watch your bead sizes. So play with your bead sizes. I have a 3 mil on here and a size 14. The sizes I use are 14 to about an 18, 230 BL. Hanak hook I like on this one. I like slotted beads as well, and I'll show you because I invert the bead. But again, you can overweight it, underweight it. You're gonna have to play with your bead sizes. This is a 3 mil, which is kind of a standard, but you'll find this fly sinks really, really quickly. The Perdigon I'm gonna tie today is called a Gasolina. It's a fly that has become quite popular over the last couple of years in North America. It does come from the competition scene. I know the person who invented it in Spain, or his dad technically invented it. The history of this fly, it comes from a piece of material he was given I think from a Czech competitor. He built a Perdigon with it, and it seemed to work really, really well on their rivers. And then they had trouble trying to replicate what the material was to do it. The reason it's called a Gasolina is it's supposed to look like oil or gas in a puddle. So if you look at a puddle and you see those blues, greens, more greens and coppers, that's essentially what we're trying to go for here. So I'm gonna tie 2 Perdigons. I'm gonna tie the OG, or one of the originals, and I'm going to tie a kind of a modern, simpler version. So we're going to go for the original. So the original is tied with 2 products, which I'm going to show you in a moment. I'm going to set the bead, and then we're going to go through it. So copper bead, tend not to play with the bead color too much on this one. The original is a copper. You can try other beads. It tends to work best with a copper bead. I am going to use black thread. I'm going to show you why when we get there. Technically, thread color wouldn't matter except for what I'm going to do with it. Okay, so keep your thread pretty thin. Secret of a Perdigon tied the right way is a thin body. So you might see some bulked up ones. You absolutely should not be adding lead weight underneath or anything like you won't need it. If you keep the profile thin and play with your bead sizes, you'll be fine. So I'm going to invert the hook. You can see now the slotted bead hangs upside down. You can also do it this way and just put your thumb around it, but definitely lock your bead in before you tie your fly. So you just see me, I'm just running it on a bit of an angle here, and you're going to see that bead's going to lock in any moment now. So it's now locked in, and if you see when it's locked in, it's flush here, leaving a nice gap between the hook point and the hook eye, so you get better hookups. And I don't like this fly on a jig hook, actually, just from the aesthetic version of it, but you could tie it on a jig hook. But I tend to like your kind of standard wet fly hook. So bead is locked in. I'm using a very thin thread. Just keep your thread thin. We do like a full body on this one too. So go right to the bend of the hook, not looking to tie this one short. So we're gonna use Coq De Leon. I wouldn't get too hung up on, is it dark, light, whatever. Make sure it has a pretty good barring and grab a reasonable clump. 4 or 5 is good enough. And about the length of the body, I would say, having spent time recently in the World Championships in Spain, the Spanish tend to tie their tails a little shorter, and I like it. So I'm gonna go, if you don't like it, you can just pull it back a little bit. So there's a bit of a shorter tail. And I like to put a couple thread wraps just behind the tail, just to lock it in. So there it is, tail's up, looks good to me. So I'm gonna trim that off. So the original, we are gonna tie the original. Wow, the real original is some mystery product, but the replica version, you're gonna see, it's a product from Hends, so if you can see that. So you'll see 233. Now you see online a lot, people just say Hends 233. That is not the way the Spanish have tied it. They will use 233 and Hends 45. So 233 you can see is kind of greenish. The 45 is like coppery. So you kind of back to what I said before on that puddle color, coppery greens. So we're gonna put a base of the green and then we're gonna kind of rib it with the 45. You could spin it as well, but I'll tie it like the original proper way. Here we go. So grab a chunk. This is the time. For those of you who know me, I like simple flies. This is one that's not as simple because we're getting into multiple materials here, but it's definitely worth it. So there's the first one. Here's a little trick. Try to keep track of which one's which. If you get it wrong, who cares? Just move on with your life. But that is the 233, or for lack of a better way of saying it, the greenish color. So now the 45, so think of, make it simple, the 45 is like the coppery color of it. So big chunk of 45. So for me, that 45 is a little shorter. That'll help me because when you get these into single strands, they tend to start to look pretty similar. So I'm gonna latch that down. I get a little bit of a piece sticking up there. So if you get something like that, just pretty simply just trim it away. Okay, so I've got my two colors in. Take your thread, nice, even, slightly taper. You can see I've just kind of smoothed it out. Here's where the thin thread happens. Nice thin body, thinly tapered. So base is the green. This is, or the 233. So I'm just gonna wrap that up, touching turns. You could, if you could put some glue on there if you're really worried, because if I lose it here at the end, it'll all spin out. I don't really bother with it, so all I've done is run that up. So that would be where you see a lot of Gasolinas today. Will it catch fish? Absolutely, 100%. But if you want the proper one, for those of you who are purists, want that little bit of an edge here, and then we take this and we space it, just like you are ribbing a fly, like you want to keep that green coming through with a little bit of copper. So what you end up with is this kind of really neat green coppery blend. And if, by the way, a little trick when you're trimming, I like to trim just behind that little gap you get on the top here. So there's another thing some people would do. You can put a wing case on the top. You can take a little glob of your favorite black nail polish works. You can take a marker and dab it on there. That does make a difference. You'll see that with some Gasolinas. Some people don't do it. I just go to a quicker compromise I was showing where you just use black thread, put a little bit of glue on it, and you just run it up the bead a little bit. So what I'm doing is just kind of running it up the bead a little bit, and that's just giving it a little bit of a black spot. That's enough to kind of mimic a wing case, but by all means, if you like the dot on the top, do it. Off you go. So that's it, Perdigon done. Only problem with that right now is it will fall apart after about one fish. Ooh, really bad job tying that off. So all we're gonna do now is you add UV. So the best stuff I've ever used is Solarez. You can see that. And when you get it, one trick you might want to do is cut the brush a little shorter. So that brush is cut a little shorter. So what I like about it's easy to brush on, tying a lot of these. Be careful not to over kind of do it. And if you do not a great job like I did right there, good enough. The fish aren't going to care. If you really want to make it perfect, you can play with it. But just make sure you don't have a big glob. One thing I like to do is invert it, just to make sure any glob kind of goes in behind the eye. Hit it with the light. I'm going to show you something. So you see this one, I kind of mucked up the thread. And if you don't like that, would fish just fine, though it is nice thin body. If you don't like it, you can just come in again. I may mess this up and just put a little bit of a glob right there, just behind the hook eye, and that will give it a really nice taper, make you look like you meant to do it. So you can see now you get this little, so if you kind of bung it up at the front, just you noticed I didn't put more on the body. So it's got, to me, the equivalent of a black wing case. It's got a nice taper to it, and it's got that coppery green flash. So that there is about as original of a Gasolina as you're gonna get. But for me, that's a lot of work. So there's like anything, there's innovation and a simpler way to do things. So we'll tie Gasolina number 2. So nothing different as the base. So everything's the same, copper bead. I'll give you repeat performance, invert it, lock the bead. Again, I kind of highly recommend locking the bead for all the reasons I stated before. So I'm locking the bead. I'm gonna tie this one a little faster. Okay, that's in there. Bring the thread back, right back to the bend. Same again, Coq De Leon. Grab, I don't know, 4 or 5, about the length of the body, catch it in, or try to catch it in, catch it in. If you don't like it, you can adjust it. We'll call that good enough. Put a couple, we won't call that good enough. There, you lock it down. So trim away the excess. I like a couple wraps below the tail just to prop it up, and we're locked in. And we're going to use now a product called, I think, Perdigonmania, something like that. So Drift has it, number 14. So it comes in 14, 15, 16. 15 and 16 will give you a coppery one. The 14 is dead on for the blend for a Gasolina. And I can tell you it is Spanish approved as well, if you're going to be staying up at night worrying if this is not a proper Gasolina. So these things are awesome. So real simple, one band already blended. So much easier than using the 2 really thin threads. Just catch it in. Again, everything stays the same, nice thin body. Slight taper, and very, very easily. You could either spin the vise or just run around. These are delicate, so just be careful. The only challenge you'll find with these is maybe breaking them. So, and you get about 3 flies out of one of these if you really are careful with it, depending, like, I mean, that's a 14, you can get sometimes more out of one of these threads. So it's not a bad investment. I think it's worth it. You know, the cheaper is the Hends with the bulk, but for speed and tying like a perfect Gasolina every time, I've switched over to the single strand. So there you have it. And you can probably see that shimmering in the light, dead on for a Gasolina. So again, if you like the wing case on top, add a little bit of marker. You can use black nail polish or black thread, run it up. And so you're kind of building in a little, and you can see I'm running it up the bead and sliding it down to build up a little black spot in behind the bead. Tie it off. The reason I'm not gluing that part is we're going to put Solarez on it. So we've got that piece. Solarez again. Just do it quickly. Let's see if I bung this one up or not. This one's a bit better. You can see, I don't know if it's coming through on camera, but you get a really nice blend of the colors coming through. Inverting if you can, because you can just, any of the excess rolls onto the bead, so you don't end up with this kind of blob on the bottom of your Perdigon. So if you're having trouble with that, there's a little fix for you. You know, hit it as long as you think is, and again, which I do sometimes, if you want, I'll just show you again, that's fine. But if you want a little bit of a cleaner fly with that, just put a little bit right behind there to fill in that gap, because sometimes it just gets absorbed, and it'll make it even cleaner fly. So there you have 2 versions of a Gasolina. The fish can't tell the difference, and to be honest, that one just looks dead perfect. There you have it, the Gasolina Perdigon.